Welcome back to the Arthur Archive. I'm Arthur, keeper of the strange, forgotten, and slightly unbelievable stories history left behind. Open the archive, turn the page, and let's see what history left behind. Today's book takes us to the time Italy went to war over a bucket. Imagine losing a war so badly that 700 years later, people don't remember the politics, the armies, or the bloodshed. They remember a bucket, not a golden treasure, not a sacred relic, just a wooden bucket. And somehow that bucket became the most famous trophy in medieval Italian history. This is the story of the War of the Bucket, a real conflict between the rival cities of Bologna and Modena in 1325. But before we go any further, there's something important to clear up. The war was not actually started by a stolen bucket. That's just the part history decided to remember. The real story is messier, pettier, bloodier, and somehow even better. To understand why two Italian cities ended up fighting a battle that would later be reduced to a plumbing joke, you have to understand medieval Italy. And medieval Italy was chaos. By the 1300s, northern Italy wasn't one united country. It was a patchwork of rival city-states, each with its own loyalties, ambitions, and grudges. And hanging over all of them was one of Europe's favorite long-running arguments. Who should hold more power, the Pope or the Holy Roman Emperor? If you supported the Pope, you were generally aligned with the Guelphs. If you supported the Emperor, you were generally aligned with the Ghibellines. That might sound like a dry political label. It wasn't. These rivalries turned into real feuds. Cities chose sides. Families chose sides. And once your city had chosen, every disagreement with your neighbor became bigger, nastier, and much harder to solve peacefully. Bologna was a proud Guelph city. Modena backed the Ghibellines, which meant the two were basically built to hate each other. And by 1325, they'd already spent years arguing over land, power, and control of strategic fortresses in the region. So no, nobody marched to war because someone pinched a bucket from a well. This was already a feud waiting to explode. The bucket just happened to become the most humiliating souvenir. The immediate spark came from a place called Montevideo. Montevideo was a fortified castle town not far from Bologna, and it mattered because whoever controlled it had a major advantage in the surrounding area. In 1325, Modena managed to seize it. That was a serious blow to Bologna, and it turned a simmering rivalry into open war. Bologna's answer was simple. If Modena wanted a fight, Bologna would bring one. So Bologna raised a huge army. And I mean huge. The exact numbers vary depending on the source, but the Bolognese force was far larger than Modena's. Some accounts put Bologna's army in the tens of thousands, while Modena's was significantly smaller. On paper, this should have been a mismatch. Bologna had more men, more resources, and every reason to feel confident. Modena, meanwhile, had to beat a bigger army while defending itself against a richer rival. So how did the smaller side win? That's where this story gets good. The two armies met on November 15, 1325 at the Battle of Zappolino. This was the main battle of the war, and Bologna had every reason to think it was about to settle the whole thing. But medieval battles aren't won on paper. They're won by who panics first. And on that day, it was Bologna. According to the accounts that survive, the Modenese and their allies used a diversion to pull part of the Bolognese forces out of position. That mattered because a large army is only useful if it's organized. Once your lines start breaking apart, your numbers stop helping you and start getting in the way. And that seems to be exactly what happened. Instead of facing one neat, coordinated enemy, Bologna ended up trying to react to a smaller force that was moving faster and striking at the right moment. Then the real attack came, and the bigger army began to fall apart. The battle didn't drag on for days. It was over in hours, which is exactly what made it so humiliating. Bologna hadn't just lost, it had lost quickly. The smaller Modenese force had routed the larger Bolognese army and sent it running back toward the city. Thousands were killed, captured, or scattered. And now Bologna had a new problem. Its enemy wasn't just victorious, its enemy was in the mood to celebrate. After the battle, the Modenese pushed toward Bologna itself, ravaging the surrounding countryside and showing very clearly who had won. And somewhere in the middle of all this came the detail that would outlive the battle itself. According to tradition, the victorious Modenese took a wooden bucket from a well near one of Bologna's city gates and carried it back to Modena as a trophy. That's it. That's the bucket. Not the cause of the war, not the reason armies marched. Just a final act of mockery after Bologna had already been beaten, which honestly might be even funnier. Because imagine suffering a humiliating military defeat, retreating behind your city walls, and then watching your rivals leave with one of your buckets just to make sure nobody ever forgot it. It's not enough to beat you. They have to accessorize the victory. And somehow that tiny insult became the part of the story that survived, not the strategic fortress, not the Guelph-Ghibelline power struggle, not the military disaster, the bucket. And in a way, that makes sense. Because history loves a ridiculous symbol. A complicated war about politics, territory, and factional rivalry is hard to summarize. A war with a bucket at the end of it? Perfect. Over time, the bucket became the story. The idea that two cities had fought an entire war over a wooden bucket was just too good to let go, even if it wasn't strictly true. And that's where we'll close the book on today's story. If you enjoyed this chapter from history, make sure you're subscribed because there are plenty more strange, forgotten, and unbelievable true stories still waiting on the shelf. Until next time, this has been Arthur Archive, and I'll see you in the next story.